Once upon a time, long, long ago, Halo mattered. Whether it was the market dominance of its PvP or the understated brilliance of its single-player campaign, Halo was a franchise that set the standard for FPS games for years to follow. However, after many subsequent releases of questionable quality, it seems what was once the flagship title of Microsoft's gaming division has all but faded from the limelight. Enter Halo Infinite. In the post-Fortnite era, gaming is a very different market than it once was, dominated in large part by free-to-play, microtransaction-filled, always-online games as a service. The morality of Microsoft tossing its hat into that ring with its PvP is something we can discuss in another video. Instead, I want to talk about Halo Infinite's campaign, a fully fleshed out single-player experience in a manner we have not seen from this franchise. Open world, extreme verticality, and an emphasis on non-linearity. But is it good? Well, after spending quite a bit of time beating the campaign, defeating every boss, rescuing every Marine, and collecting all my valor, I think I'm finally ready to answer that question, honestly. First, I'd like to start with the actual mechanics of the game, as in my opinion, that is the most important part of any game. Even a passing play of Halo Infinite will impress upon you the expanded depth of gameplay, with simple additions such as sliding and vaulting giving the player a much more dynamic playground. This is in addition to a select number of equipment, by far the most notable of which being the grapple hook. Ah, the grapple hook. Perhaps the very core of many of my issues with this game. It allows you to move fast. Really fast. So fast, in fact, that virtually every vehicle becomes useless with but a few upgrades. This is only exacerbated by the overall haphazard design of the open world. In combination with Halo's infamously bouncy vehicle physics, it creates a situation where the grapple hook is almost always the best option for traversal. Until you get the Wasp. Good lord, the Wasp. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The contextual feel of the world is very enjoyable, until it isn't. Despite being an open world game, every now and again you encounter an invisible wall, restricting your true freedom. And sometimes Master Chief just feels small in comparison to his environment, getting caught and vaulting over ankle-high obstacles. But I do like the ammo stations though. Seriously, what a good idea. While every other Halo was about run and gunning, dropping an empty weapon for a fresh one, this system now gives you a reason to hold a favorite weapon past its usefulness, and it helps to make banished outposts feel more legitimate. Now that we've discussed the basic mechanics, let's move to a topic we've already briefly touched: map design. The map in general feels decent when involved in a battle or a mission, with classic Bungie-style architecture informing the whole game. However, it's the pieces in between that leave a lot to be desired. Besides the fact that it has a rather monotone look outside of a few landmarks, the world is pretty unfriendly to navigate by vehicles which are quickly made redundant by a few upgrades to the grapple hook. Once I started using the grapple hook regularly, the map lost a lot of its personality, as my main strategy became finding the highest ridge and cheesing enemy engagements. This also began to expose some of the faults in the AI, as they would either not notice me despite me being right next to them, or cause them to notice me without any line of sight. The map is littered with side missions, most involving rescuing Marines, liberating bases, or defeating bosses. These are all contextually simple, but the arena design when doing these tasks are generally good, though sometimes I felt banished bases were so big, the illusion of a quote-unquote siege became lost. There are also quite a few collectibles and Easter eggs on the map, which definitely help to provide more flavor, and even add that extra touch of inspiration. While the overworld was just okay, the core design philosophy of the game succeeds in providing the classic Halo feel.
Anybody else got the feeling like they're gonna be viciously murdered?
Considering future installments seem likely to take place on Zeta Halo as well, I'm looking forward to the improvements 343 will invariably make in their design skills, as they begin to incorporate new biomes and more dungeons. Next, let's talk about one of my biggest praises for Halo Infinite, yet also one of my biggest gripes. There are boss fights in Halo Infinite, the majority of which felt realistically challenging, without going into the realm of total nonsense. However, I couldn't say that if some of the fights weren't total nonsense. Unfortunately, these fights didn't often come down to tactics, but the fact that the bosses are generally bullet sponges with the health equivalent of 37 scorpions, using unfavorable terrain and sometimes even broken mechanics to their advantage. While the most powerful versions of each unit can be very tough, with some broaching the threshold of absolute absurdity, these bosses are a step above even that, and often supported by a unit of Banished. A perfect example is the Hunter. Though difficult to defeat, they are manageable in their base form with smart tactics and quick movement utilizing your equipments. However, I did not encounter a single special hunter I didn't have to cheese my way through, with one encounter in particular running upwards of 45 minutes. This isn't even mentioning the absurdity involved in the final battle, which I won't spoil. Let's just say, raw skill simply isn't enough. More often than not, I mitigated the danger by flying a wasp up to a ridge and using a sniper after buzzing away the supporting units. But this just felt wrong. Rather than testing myself against the enemy units, I was essentially skipping the fight, as an actual fair confrontation with some of these bosses is simply out of the question. The wasp became my go-to tactic for everything until the late game, when flying units made it a little more difficult, but it remained the best tactic throughout the entirety of my playthrough of Halo Infinite. While a few of these bosses are directly involved in the story, most are optional targets that you've been tasked with defeating, which rewards you with a special variant of your normally available weapons. In some cases, these are a simple direct upgrade to stats or an additional functionality, while sometimes it changes the actual niche of the gun. In particular, I enjoy the Arcane Sentinel Rifle, as it's broken enough to be considered a boss fight on its own. However, a few of the special weapons change the gun for the worse, and you're left wondering, why? Why did I spend 45 minutes circling a ridge with a sniper rifle for this thing? This strategy is made all the easier by the introduction of Forward Operating Bases, or FOBs. FOBs act as a deployment base for your marines, weapons, and vehicles, and are actually one of my favorite mechanics in the game. I found it really rewarding to liberate a FOB, free some marines, and return later to see them patrolling that area of the map. However, I rarely ever utilized my marines for missions intentionally, as the terrain simply made it too much trouble, and the Wasp couldn't carry units. But this never deterred them. One of the funniest features of Halo Infinite is just how determined the Marines are, often crossing huge swaths of terrain and arriving at your location minutes after your departure. They are also fairly competent in battle, especially when supplied with a good weapon. Unfortunately, their determination is only matched by their incompetence, as they would often eliminate themselves, or me, for no particular reason. I would love to see the Marines be able to drive in the future, though I'm sure it'd be a nightmare for 343 to program an AI with destination logic in an open world game. Moving to the story and presentation, I was actually quite surprised by how classic Halo Infinite felt. Everything from the uniforms on your Marines to the actual geometric design of the levels felt incredibly traditional. And this is no surprise, as Joseph Staten, a primary writer and director for the first 3 Halos, was called on to be project lead for the Infinite campaign. All I can say is thank the Reclaimer, as the set dressing and reliability of Master Chief's character really pull the game together. I found myself surprisingly invested in the fates of Master Chief, the weapon, and even Echo 216. And after finishing the game, I just want to see the ultimate fate of Zeta Halo.
I'll find them.
The relationship between Master Chief and the weapon was better than I thought it could be. Certainly much more than
just dust and echoes.
with the weapon successfully solidifying herself as a character, while Master Chief mines deeper into who he actually is. The laconic speech of Master Chief perfectly juxtaposes the overexcited ramblings of the weapon, with both providing truly great moments of emotional catharsis to each other, one with an elegant simplicity, and the other with a childlike naivety. While much of the through lines of Halo 5 are thrown out, besides the story core of Cortana and Chief, it detracted in no way from my engagement with the story. The game is written in such a way where you have no need to play Halo 5, as I'm sure was 343's intention. While there are plenty of callbacks to earlier titles in terms of setting and characters and dialogue, I had no problem understanding the story despite never finishing Halo 4 or even starting 5. But if there is one truly weak area in Halo Infinite, it would have to be the AI. Equal parts brilliant and deficient, it wasn't uncommon to sneak up on an entire crowd of enemies, despite being an allowed vehicle, only to have that same vehicle lasered out of the air by disruptor pistols later in the same session. Each marvelous flank was accompanied by a magnificent flub, and eventually the inconsistencies in their logic began being patched retroactively by 343, in the form of health, and more health. I know Microsoft bought Bethesda fairly recently, but turning enemies into tanks as a form of difficulty is the last lesson I would take from them. The wishy-washiness of the AI in tandem with the ever-increasing health, eventually made some of the weapons near useless if they weren't already, as they either couldn't sustain enough damage or they didn't have a comfortable range for fights. Some fights became difficult to the point of luck, particularly fights involving shielded brutes or sword-carrying elites inside interiors, and it all stems from using health to cover up below-average AI.
Did you see that?
There were also a myriad of technical glitches related to the open world that I would consistently run into. One of the most common being despawning. I cannot tell you how many times I've been fighting a Banshee only for it to evaporate into thin air. Sometimes this would extend to enemies as well, which was pretty annoying after buzzing a brute chieftain for his gravity hammer, only to end up with nothing in my hands. But these instances were fairly rare in my playthrough, mostly serving as a source of comedy more than anything. Overall, I found Halo Infinite's campaign to be an enjoyable package, certainly better than what I thought 343 Studios was capable of. I think they may have finally keyed back in on what a Halo game should be, and produce something that is greater than a sum of its parts. The surprising depth of the mechanics, in tandem with the visual presentation, leaves me excited for the future of Halo in a way I haven't been since I was a young kid, skipping school to play Halo 3 with my friends. I give the campaign a 7 out of 10. While there is room for improvement, 343 has produced an excellent base to expand upon, and without that extra requirement of laying a new foundation every Halo entry, I expect 343 to excel in the quality of future entries. You hear that, 343? I have expectations for you. As a whole package, I give Halo Infinite an 8 out of 10. With its above-average campaign, depthful mechanics, and ever-increasing variety of PvP modes, it's definitely a valid choice to be a mainstay in your gaming schedule. While the cosmetic grind and server issues do hold it back a bit in the PvP department, ultimately, these are issues that can be worked out over time, and in the case of cosmetics, matter far less to me than they would in a third-person game, such as Fortnite. So what did you think of Halo Infinite? Did you enjoy it as much as I did? Or did you have a critique that I didn't mention? Let me know down below in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this if you enjoyed this one. Once again, this has been your boy, Big Sour, and I'm asking you to take good care of yourself. Peace and love, everyone.